This is the Louie T Network. Hey, either you're outside or you're
in the lab room.
Draft zone.
Hey, yo, who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome. You are in the lab room. Of course, I am your host, Louie. Thank you for joining me. This is the 2015 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series, where I aim to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2015 NFL Draft by simply looking at their selections and giving each pick a grade using our baseball grading scale: single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts in the draft wrap-up series, as we cannot tell how these players will pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so, after tallying up a score for each player, we get an aggregate score as a whole for that team's draft. Divide by the number of picks, add in and apply bonuses when necessary, and get a final score and grade for that team's draft. Move on to the next team in the process picked by you, the viewers. Yes, this is the up format, the you pick format. You, the viewers, make the next selection by simply being the first. No equivocations. Be the first to leave a post in the comment section stating two things: the phrase next, N-E-X-T, and the team you would like to see next. I don't care how you phrase it, just gotta be first and have those two components in the comment section and be first. So, with all of those particulars out of the way, the next team up on the docket is the Jets, and their 2015 NFL Draft. And it's all new. It's all brand spanking new in New York. New GM Mike McCagnon, new head coach Todd Bowles. It's a different look. It's a different feel. It's a different team in New York. Still defensive minded, headed up by a defensive minded head coach. But everything else is different except for your quarterback situation with Geno Smith. We'll talk about that at another date and time. Let's talk about this 2015 NFL Draft, however, and how the Jets were able to potentially make their team good enough to compete in the AFC East with those big, bad Patriots. Let's talk about this 2015 Draft for the Jets. We start in the first round. Number 6 overall selection, defensive lineman out of USC, Leonard Williams, is the pick. Now, the Jets, I don't think they really had this guy on their board. Realistically, with all of the talk leading up to the draft, I don't think there was any way possible the Jets thought they'd be able to get their hands on this man. I mean, let's face it, at one point we were talking about him potentially being the first pick in the draft. And so, in my mind, I said there's no way he gets past the Raiders. And I believe the Raiders were number 4, if I'm not mistaken. I said there's no way he gets past the Raiders at 4. No way, no how. The Redskins were hot on this guy's trail early on in the process as well. And so to me, I thought if he gets past Oakland, there's no way he gets past Washington at 5. So there was no way the Jets were going to get a crack at this guy at 6. So I think the Jets, and I always say this, when you're in the top 5, top 7, you make a list of guys that stop at the number of picks, that are in front of you. So if you're the Jets, you make a list of 6 guys. You got the 6th pick in the draft. One of those guys is bound to be there when you make a selection at 6. When you're in the top 10, you're looking for the best player available. You're looking for, it'd be great if you can get a combination of the two, best player available and fitting a need. But again, you're just looking for talent, man. You can't go in the top 10 of the draft and look to fit a need instead of getting the best player available. You get yourself in trouble that way. You need to get talent. That's why you're drafting so high. You need more talent on your football team. So if you're the Jets, you're just making a list of 6 guys one of those 6 is bound to be there, if not more. The highest of those 6 on your board, when you're up to make your selection, you take them. That to me is the way you do it. And I'm thinking that Leonard Williams was pretty high on their board. They didn't think he'd be there though at 6, but it happened so. The draft kind of broke favorable for the Jets in a way that they were able to get their hands on a guy that they probably didn't see falling to them in this draft. So really, I don't know what their expectations were. I don't know what they were, looking to do. But once this happened, they scrapped all the other plans that they had on the table. I mean, I don't know who they were willing to take, and what I would be very interested to know that if he wasn't there, who would have been the pick? Because I don't really know what direction the Jets were going to go in. Were they going to take a corner? You don't know. I mean, after what they did in free agency, you would like to think the cornerback situation was basically set. So you took the cornerback situation off the board. I mean, what were they going to do? So you don't know, and frankly, it doesn't matter at this point. Once Leonard Williams was on the board, when the Jets were up on the clock, all other players got scrapped, and they said, man, this is a can't-miss prospect. And don't forget, they've got some guys with some contract situations that aren't too happy. I don't know if they're going to be able to keep Muhammad Wilkerson and Sheldon Richardson happy. I think you have to pick one of the two. I think the Jets are leaning towards keeping Sheldon Richardson and keeping that younger movement and allowing a guy like a guy like Muhammad Wilkerson to potentially no longer be a Jet. It sounds like he's been on the trading block forever. I don't know what the dynamics of that situation is. Guys are looking to get paid. I can't blame them. But they said, look, we got a chance to get a player that we graded out very favorably, very highly, and we feel like he's one of the best players in the draft. But let's not delay. Let's turn the card in right away. And so they went and got a football player that they think can come in and help. And again, when you got a defensive-minded head coach and he's got a chance to get another piece on that defense, he's not going to hesitate. And so in the first round, 6th pick overall, defensive lineman out of USC, Leonard Williams for me, is a hit hard, hit deep, out of here shot to center field. It's not coming back. It's a home run for the New York Jets. And I tell you what, I'm not going to break them down. I've already done that. You're looking for a thorough breakdown of Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams! Leonard Williams. Got to go to my 2015 Draft Prospects 101 series and check that out. But I will say this much. This guy has dominant traits. He's extremely quick. He can control and take over a football game if you allow him to. I think the shoulder injury that he had that didn't allow him to lift weights and didn't allow him to showcase some things at the combine and was somewhat of a red flag for some teams. Look, I don't know anything about that. Again, I always preference all of that stuff that I hear with this. I don't know anything about that. All I can tell you is what I saw on tape. This guy has dominant traits, and so the Jets get themselves a very good football player. Let's see if he can flourish in Todd Bowles' defensive system. You go to the 2nd round, 37th overall selection, wide receiver out of Ohio State, the Ohio State University. Devin Smith is the pick. Let's jump into his pros. 6 foot, 196 pounds of pure speed at the wide receiver position. This guy is legit. Acceleration is the next pro. We're talking about a 4'4", 240 gap. Okay, he's a blazer at 6 feet, basically 200 pounds. This is a guy that can accelerate with the best of them. And to me, his separation comes from not only him being able to get off the line freely, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. There's not a lot of times you see this guy jammed up and hemmed up at the line of scrimmage because they're afraid of the long distance speed. So he's able to get a clean release off the line of scrimmage, eat up your cushion, get even, and you know the motto, you know the mantra. If you've ever played the wide receiver position, you've probably heard this even if you haven't. Even, leave him. If you're even, we're leaving, okay? If you're a receiver and you catch up to that cornerback, you catch up to that safety, you're supposed to smoke him. And this guy does it with the best of them in this draft. He's explosive. Explosive. Now, this isn't just any regular old explosion, okay? We're talking about 3 seasons of 20+ yards per catch average, okay? 20 yards per catch or more in 3 consecutive seasons at Ohio State. Ridiculous. And just last season in 14, 28.2 yards per catch. And we're not talking about 14 catches for 414 yards. We're not talking about a pedestrian number amount of catches, which makes your average look tremendous. We're talking about a guy that had about 40-something grabs, and he's up there with around 800 and something yards receiving. So you're talking about a guy that is a legit threat each time he touches the football to take it the distance, making big plays, and he's getting the football with regularity. So you're talking about a guy that's averaging at least 4 or 5 grabs a game, and yet he's still making all of these big plays and catches. He's an explosive football player. Which takes me to my next pro, and this is right here why this guy was a 2nd-round pick. This is why this kid has the potential to really tear the roof off of the National Football League. It's because he's the absolute best deep ball tracker I've ever seen in my life. And yeah, that's a pretty lofty statement, at least coming from college to the NFL. I'll preface it with that. He's the best deep ball tracker I've ever seen coming from the collegiate group to the NFL, okay? This is a guy that when the football is in the air and he's 30, 40, 50 yards down the field, he can track it over the shoulder, he can stop, he's running, stop, locate the football, go back and get it if it's short. He can stop, go up, leap, elevate, come down with the football. There isn't any problems that he has with locating the football. And to me, the prettiest catch you will see from this guy is the over-the-shoulder catch. Because the over-the-shoulder catch can be on the money right here. It can be too far inside over here. It can be over the shoulder to the outside, leaning, going on towards out of bounds over here, and he'll make it look effortless. I mean, there were so many times where the football was thrown to the outside shoulder, and he's got to lean, and he's got to not break stride, and he's got to catch the football, and he's able to get the feet down, and he's able to make these acrobatic catches, or he's got to stop on a dime, turn around, locate the football, go up and get it, and come down with it. He just tracks the football so beautifully. You see so many times, so often, guys can't find the football when it's over their shoulder, when they gotta stop, when it's too short and they gotta adjust to it. Guys can't get to the football. This guy somehow, some way, always finds a way to get to the football. He's the absolute best I've seen coming from college to the NFL. Let's see if it translates, if he's able to continue going after and tracking down the deep ball, because to me, that is his best attribute. When you throw it deep, this is why those numbers are so lofty. This is why he's so explosive, is because when you throw it deep, he goes and gets it. And there is no way that you can outthrow this guy with the type of speed that he has and the ability that he has to track the football. Of course, you say that tongue-in-cheek. You can outthrow a guy. But what I'm saying is, if you put it in his general vicinity, 40, 50 yards down the field, he's going to find a way to come up with the football. Go watch that Wisconsin Big Ten championship game. I mean, how many big plays for touchdowns did he have in that game? At least 3. I mean, we're talking about 30, 40, 50 yards down the field, he's catching touchdowns on Wisconsin. You look at any game you want, just turn on the tape. This guy is making a huge play, and it's something that allowed Ohio State to win the national championship. Guys like Devin Smith making huge plays in the passing game. When you got 3 different quarterbacks in one season, 3 different quarterbacks, you got to have guys like this going and making plays for you, for those quarterbacks to flourish. And Devin Smith was definitely their go-to guy when they were looking to go deep down the field. He's got great hands. And that's something that you, in order to track the football and be the absolute best at anything, especially if you're talking receiver, if you're going to be the absolute best at tracking the deep ball, doesn't mean that you just can locate it. Hey, anybody can find the football. It's got to be a hand-eye coordination thing. You find it, then you got to go and get it. With these 2 things right here, these things we call Mets hands, you got to go find it, and you got to go catch it. And he catches the football. It's one thing to find it, locate the football, track it, but then there's another thing to make sure you come down with that football. He seems to do that. His hands are pretty solid. I didn't see many instances on tape where the football hit the ground and he had a chance to get it. If he's had a chance to get his hands on it, Generally, 9 times out of 10, he's going to come down with the football. His production climb is another pro, and this is one of the last pros I want to talk about. His production climb shows you that he was getting better each and every year as a receiver as more and more opportunities were afforded to him. So production climb, what do I mean by that? Each of his last 3 seasons at Ohio State, he saw climbs in production in catches, touchdowns, and yards receiving. All went up successively in the last 3 years. So what that means is he went from getting, a little to no snaps to getting enough snaps to be a relevant football player to being one of the main players on that offense. And each year as he got more and more playing time, the numbers went up and up and up. So he's getting better as a receiver. He's starting to put together the entire package. He's not a one-trick pony. I don't want you to think that that's the only thing this guy can do. He can do some other things. He can run the short to intermediate routes. But the thing that separates him from all the rest of the receivers in this draft is his ability to win the deep ball. And that's why this guy is going to be a big fixture in this Jets offense if they know how to use him right. And if the quarterback situation is able to be solidified, this guy could be a major weapon down the field for the New York Jets. He gives you special teams value as well. You can put him back on punts if need be. He's a guy that'll be down there on punts as a gunner. So you get a number of things. He's not going to be your number 1 or your number 2 option this year. You got Brandon Marshall on one side. You got Eric Decker on the other. I still like Jeremy Curley. So there are options on this team to throw the football to. So he isn't necessarily stepping in day 1 and you're looking for him to be your number 2 receiver starting. He's going to need to contribute on special teams in some form or fashion. And so to me, him coming in being a guy that can get down there, field some punts, and also be a gunner for you, that also helps as well. So that's Devin Smith and his pros. Let's jump into a few of his cons. I told you he was 6 feet, 196. Feel like he needs to get functionally stronger. I think he needs to get a little bit stronger as a wide receiver. Put on a little bit of muscle, a little bit more bulk, because at the next level, I don't think teams are going to be as hesitant. And this is another con. Let's jump into this one. How will he fare against press coverage? Because this isn't college football, okay? I think in college, what you find is a lot of corners aren't fully sold on their capabilities. They're a little bit more afraid and tentative than NFL corners are. NFL guys, they're confident in their abilities. They will come up at the line of scrimmage. They will challenge you. They'll get in your grill. And he's going to have to be able to win press coverage. And so can he get off the line of scrimmage cleanly, win off the line of scrimmage, and allow him to beat defensive backs down the field? That's the question. I don't have the answer to that because you did not see it enough at Ohio State. Guys were afraid and unwilling to challenge this guy at the line of scrimmage. So I feel like he's got to get stronger because I don't think that's something right now that he possesses the ability to do. If he's going up against Darrelle Revis every day in practice and Revis is able to get his hands on him at the line of scrimmage, Darrelle Revis is going to really take him out of the play because Darrelle Revis is a physical corner. We know how he likes to play. We know his brand of football. And there are many guys around the league like Darrelle Revis who want to get in your face, want to challenge you at the line of scrimmage. He's going to have to be able to win those matchups at the line of scrimmage and be able to get into his routes a lot quicker. And so we'll see what happens with that. I'm curious as to how he's able to deal with guys who are being physical with him because he didn't have to deal with that at Ohio State. He's not physical as a blocker. And to me, all of the things that I just mentioned all go back to the first con that I mentioned, and that's him just getting functionally stronger. He's not strong at the point of attack as a blocker. He's not a guy that you worry about. You can engage him and then you can discard him. He's not a guy that's going to be able to hold his weight in the run game or as a receiver blocking for a wide receiver screen or anything of that nature. He's a guy that just needs to get stronger. If he gets stronger, other aspects of his game will improve just because he's a more physical football player. So we'll see if he's able to get into that Jets weight training program, put on a few pounds, become stronger, and really have his game not be affected by him putting on a few pounds. If he can still run and do all of the things that I mentioned earlier and put on another 7 or 10 pounds of muscle, you got yourself a hell of a football player in the second round, 37th overall selection wide receiver out of Ohio State, the Ohio State University. Devin Smith for me. You can put it on the board! Yes! This is a home run. I really like this kid, and I told you he's the best deep ball tracker I've seen coming out of the collegiate game to the National Football League. This kid has an elite trait that can win you football games. Guys that can take it deep can change the ball game. I talk about elite quarterbacks and the ability to hit the deep ball and not miss it. This is the type of guy that can take a game, flip it on its head, and change the outcome because he can get it done down the field. Big plays change games. This guy is a potential game changer for this New York Jets offense. He brings something to the table you don't have, and that's what you gotta love about Devin Smith. Brandon Marshall, his best days of football are long gone. Eric Decker is not a deep threat. Jeremy Curley, much better as a slot option, quicker than fast. He's not blowing by anybody. This kid here, Devin Smith, he is. He's the real deal. Let's see if they can utilize him correctly in New York. Round 3, 82nd overall selection, outside linebacker out of Louisville, Lorenzo Malden is the pick. You look at his pros, 6'4", 259-pound linebacker. You're talking about a guy with really good size. You're essentially saying 6'4", 260. We talked about this draft and all of the edge rushers and how most of these guys are 245, 247, pounds. When you talk about the Shane Rays of the world, the Vic Beasleys, you're talking about Randy Gregory, those guys were a lot lighter in the pants. Eli Harrell, these are all guys that are right around 245 pounds, which is fine. But when you start talking about the Alvin Bud Duprees of the world, and you start talking about the Dante Fowler Jr.'s, you add this kid in here, and Lorenzo Malden, I'm talking about guys with a little bit more girth, the ability to stand up at the point of attack a little bit better, have a little bit more weight in their pants, and are able to set the edge in the run game. You know this to be a fact, okay? They're a little bit different than some of the other guys. Some of those guys don't have the same amount of explosion. Now, I don't want to lump Dante Fowler Jr. and Alvin Bud Dupree in that mix because those guys are explosive. He isn't as explosive, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but that's good size. You like what he brings to the table right here. And I'll tell you who I think he is going to replace down the line as we continue to talk about Lorenzo Malden in his breakdown. But he sets the edge in the run game. I just spoke to that. I just alluded to that. This is a guy that has no problem setting the edge in the run game and forcing runs back to the inside, where the Jets might have the best defensive line in all of the National Football League. So if you get a guy that's stout at the point of attack, that can turn runs back to the inside because there's no way to get outside of this guy just stonewalling a tackle or a pulling guard or a tight end, you got yourself a football player, and Lorenzo Malden is exactly that. Stout at the point of attack, again, I just talked about that indirectly, talking about him setting the edge in the run game. You're not setting any edge in any run game if you're not stout at the point of attack. If guys are blowing you 2-3 yards off the line of scrimmage, you're not setting the edge. You're not physical enough to do what's necessary to help your team play solid run defense. And so this is a guy that's stout at the point of attack, which allows him to set an edge in the run game. He stacks and sheds. It's something that I was really impressed with watching him on tape. He's a guy that is able to be stout at the point of attack, stand up a tight end, get rid of him when the ball carrier comes his way, make a tackle, get in on the play. So he's a guy that stacks and sheds very well. And so you can see right now, you're talking about a really good run defending outside linebacker, which is great. You need to have guys that can do that. But he can get pressure on the quarterback. That's the next pro. This is a guy that I feel like still has some developmental things that he has to work on, and you're going to have to season him. He's not a finished product by any means, and I think the Jets understand that. That's why he's a third-round pick. However, this is a guy that is starting to kind of get into his own. He's starting to learn how to get pressure on the quarterback more consistently, get with the right coaches. They're able to teach him some better techniques. This is a guy that could eventually grow into a double-digit sack getter. Never did that in college, so don't expect that from him anytime soon in the pros. But I tell you what, with a little bit of work, some polishing, you get around some guys that are some pros that have done this for a very long time, he could be a guy that could start making some noise for this Jets defense down the road. perseverance. And to me, this is one of his biggest attributes, not just as a football player, but as a man. Here's a guy that grew up, never knew his father. Father was gone by the time he was born. Mother was in and out of jail, in prison. She struggled with the bottle, alcoholic. And so she continuously got into trouble. He, at times, had to find places to live. It wasn't really a conducive situation for him growing up, and yet he persevered, not just as a football player. Forget about the football, because that to me is secondary when you're talking about life. You're talking about your parents and not having someone be there for you on a consistent basis, not really having the type of role models that you need in your life growing up. To have the perseverance to be able to get past those obstacles that were put in front of you and find your way to college and excel while at college is a testament to how strong-minded and how much perseverance Lorenzo Mauldin has. So to me, when you get players like that who have been through a lot, have seen a lot at such a young age, they are the type of guys that will run through walls for you. They will be the type of guys that when things get tough in that locker room, they won't fold up the tent and pack it in. They'll be ready to fight to the end. Those are the kind of guys you want in your locker room. So this guy going to play with a chip on his shoulder. He's going to be the type of player that gives you everything he's got in the tank. You look at his cons. Lacks explosion. And I talked about Bud Dupree. I talked about Dante Fowler Jr., some of the bigger guys at the outside linebacker position in this draft. Well, those guys are explosive. Those guys have elite first steps. Those guys do some things sideline to sideline. Lorenzo Mauldin is not that type of player. He's a 4.85 40 athlete. He's not a guy that is extremely explosive. There isn't an electric first step. So there are some things you're going to have to work on with him. He's going to have to be a little bit more crafty as opposed to being explosive as a pass rusher. But those are some things you can get around because there are a lot of intangibles to work with Lorenzo Mauldin. He needs to diversify his rush. And I talked about this already. This is a guy that never had more than 7.5 sacks in his collegiate career in one season. So he needs some work. He needs to redefine what is a pass rushing move. You can't win with a bull rush on a consistent basis. Guys are too strong for that at the National Football League level. You're going to have to mix it up. Going to have to come with an occasional spin, a rip move to the outside, a rip move to the inside, a swim move. Going to have to come with something hard outside, back inside. He's going to have to develop an array of moves to allow him to get to the quarterback. We'll see if they can get with this kid and help him diversify his pass rushing moves, because right now it's very stale. And I already told you he lacks an explosive first step. So there's nothing that really terrifies that tackle in front of you. If you don't have a number of moves that you can throw at him to keep him guessing and keep him off balance, you're not going to win consistently in this league and get to the quarterback. You know who he reminds me of is Calvin Pace. You look at Calvin Pace, big 6'4" linebacker, about 270 pounds, great in the run game, sets a mean edge. But later on in his career, he found ways to get to the quarterback. If I'm not mistaken, Calvin Pace had about 10 sacks last year. He's like in his 10th year in the league. So he's a guy that never was overly athletic, but was always a guy that just understood, I'm gonna set this edge in the run game. I'm going to be a dominant presence in the run game, and whatever you get out of me as a pass rusher is an extra cherry on the top. And so I look at him as a Calvin Pace type, a big guy that can set the edge in the run game, and if he can learn how to get to the quarterback, he can be a guy that can hang around this league for 10 to 12 years. In the third round, 82nd overall selection, outside linebacker out of Louisville, Lorenzo Mauldin is a double for me. Solid football player, solid prospect, a lot of things he has to work on, but if you can get those things ironed out, you can have yourself a football player down the road in Lorenzo Mauldin. You go to the fourth round, 103rd overall selection, quarterback out of Baylor. Bryce Petty is the pick, probably the most controversial pick in this Jets draft in 2015. You know why it's a controversial pick. You got Geno Smith over there. He's up, he's down, he's all around. Could Bryce Petty be the biggest beneficiary of a new coaching staff, new bodies in here, new general manager, and Geno Smith potentially struggling at the quarterback position? he could be the guy that benefits the most out of all of that. Because again, the new coaching staff, the new general manager did not draft and select Geno Smith. That was the old administration. They have no ties to Geno Smith. They're going to give him every opportunity to prove that he belongs as the Jets signal caller. But if he cannot get the job done, and I think it's going to be a quick hook in New York with them going out and getting Ryan Fitzpatrick, they feel good about a competent backup behind them. They will not hesitate because this defense is probably going to be good enough to win football games. If Geno Smith is turned over the football, they will not hesitate to pull the trigger and put in Ryan Fitzpatrick. And then you have Bryce Petty warming up in the bullpen. Let's talk about this kid and why he could be the heir apparent to the throne at the quarterback position in New York. So 6'3", 230-pound quarterback. This is a big kid. And I looked at him, and every time I looked at him, I always said, you're kind of a fat boy, man. You're not the most athletic guy. You don't turn down many meals, you know, when you look at Bryce Petty. But then I saw the tape, and I'm like, he's a sneaky athlete. That's the next pro. When you play in a spread offense, which is what they ran at Baylor under Art Briles, that's just what they do. You gotta be somewhat athletic. Now, he's not Robert Griffin III, okay? But they didn't ask him to be. They didn't ask him to run it very often, but when they did, when he pulled that football out on that read option and he took off, I was impressed with what Bryce was able to do with that football, man. He was able to tote the rock, and he's a tough kid. That's another pro. Okay, he's a tough kid, man. I was surprised at how some of these shots. Is it smart? No. You don't want your quarterback taking the type of shots he took. He was willing to lower the shoulder. He was willing to fight for that extra yard. But you also got to protect yourself and know when to say when. He took some shots in the pocket, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. He actually had a concussion, and so while at Baylor, took some shots. So he's a tough cookie, okay? This isn't your standard run-of-the-mill quarterback that's like a deer in headlights when pressure is coming and he's going tense up because he doesn't want to get hit. This is a tough kid. He can take a shot and he can take a lick and keep on ticking, but that's not what you want out of your quarterback. You want your quarterback to be smart, but this is a tough kid nonetheless. He's got a solid arm, okay? I love his short to intermediate accuracy as well. Let's go ahead and lump those two together. He's got a solid arm, can make just about any throw you're asking him to make. I think his short to intermediate accuracy is on point. He's going to have a quick release. Again, when you're in a spread offense, you know, a lot of times you get the football, find the laces, and you get it out to your receiver, whether it's a hitch, it's a bubble screen. It's a lot of short passes in a spread offense. You're going to have a lot of short to intermediate routes, a lot of hitches and stops down the field, curls and comebacks. So you're going to get the ball out of your hands quickly. He gave guys an opportunity to catch it on the run, in stride, and make plays. So his short to intermediate accuracy, it goes along with the good arm that he has, a solid arm. We'll talk about some of the things that I think he needs to work on down the line, but his tremendous collegiate success has to be something that really gives Jets fans a cause for optimism. It really gives them hope for the future with this kid, because he was a tremendous quarterback at the collegiate level. Here's a guy that was throwing for well over 4,000 yards. Last 2 seasons, I think he had close to 4,000 and then well over 4,000. And the interception and touchdown numbers were heavily skewed in the favor of the touchdowns. His touchdown to interception ratio through the roof. One year, I want to say it was something like 34 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And again, when you're playing a spread offense, I'm looking for you to minimize the amount of mistakes because there's so many safe throws built in there, and you're keeping the defense so off balance by the threat of the run with the read option and pulling the football out. It's so many stresses that you put on the defense that you should be throwing to some guys that are open, and you should be able to minimize the amount of mistakes that you make. So here's a guy that can and will often take care of the football. He will make some interesting, to say the least, and that's probably putting it very nicely, decisions with the football that he could get in trouble with and for at the next level. But to me, his tremendous collegiate success as another pro and something that should have the Jets fans really clamoring to see what this kid could do at the next level if given the opportunity. He was a winner. Okay, that's the last pro you get out of me for Bryce Petty. He was a winner. 21-4 as a college starter. And to just put a little bit of a cherry on top, he was part of the winningest class in Baylor Bears football history. Since he's been on campus the last 4 years, this team has won more football games as a program than they had in school history. So he's all he knows is win. Okay, this is a guy that went to a number of bowl games, had a heartbreak last year against Michigan State, had that game, they were winning up big. They took their foot off the gas pedal and lost in his final collegiate football game. But make no mistake about it, this is a kid that knows winning, and that's what the Jets need, a quarterback that can get the job done at the next level. Can he? We don't know. We shall see. Let's jump into his cons. I am not in love with his footwork, and a lot of times that's what you get from quarterbacks out of the spread offense. I think with him, his biggest issue is he thinks he's Jay Cutler. He's one of these guys that has extreme confidence in his arm, which you should. Okay, if you're a quarterback, I need you to have it up here. I need you to have it here, and I need you to be confident in your abilities, but you also got to be smart, and that's why I need you to have it here. He's a guy that will throw off his back foot. No problems doing it. He will throw off his back foot, and it won't always be the smartest decision. It won't always be the best throw, and so he's got to stop doing that. There's a lot of shuffling of the feet when there shouldn't be. His footwork isn't clean at times, and that's why you get some errant throws, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Speaking of which, his next con, inconsistency. That kills me on tape. That's the biggest problem I have with Bryce Petty is the inconsistency. One game, you'll get out of this kid, 24 of 31, 347 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, barely win 70-6. And you're like, man, that's impressive. And then the next week they're playing Texas, and he goes 6 of 17 for 101 yards, and one touchdown, 1 interception, and they win an ugly game, and you're like, man, he didn't play well at all in that game. That's what you get out of Bryce Petty. The inability to consistently hit the deep ball is something that really perturbs me. I've watched him miss deep ball after deep ball opportunity, and you get a plethora of them at Baylor. Just look at Robert Griffin III and his time at Baylor. That's what separated him from a lot of the guys coming into the draft at that time, was his ability to hit that deep ball on a consistent basis, which is why he won the Heisman Trophy. Not to mention, of course, his athleticism and ability to run and do a number of different things, but he was able to hit that deep ball. Bryce Petty misses that deep ball for me way too often. He'll hit it, his fair share of deep balls now. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to make it seem like he never hits the deep ball. He's not Ryan Tannehill or anything like that, but here's an opportunity for you to make a big play, change the fortunes of the game, change the outcome potentially, and he's missing too many receivers streaking wide open down the field, and that's something that is a big problem for me. I always talk about the difference between the good, the great, and the elite quarterbacks in this league, and really where you start to see that clear delineation is when you start talking about hitting the deep ball, and this guy doesn't do it enough for me with enough consistency. He's a primary read quarterback. To me, that's another thing they're going to have to work on. When you're in a spread offense, normally your first read is open. So you drop back, whether you take one step and you let it rip, whatever, guy is usually open. And with Bryce Petty, a lot of times that first receiver was open, but when he wasn't, he had a problem looking elsewhere to get rid of the football. Remember I told you he took some shots in the pocket? He was a tough guy. A lot of times when he took those shots, it was because that first read wasn't open and he hesitated, and then trouble ensued. There are some times where he actually tried to force it to that primary read despite him not being open. I saw a number of plays where this guy could have easily thrown some picks. Guys just couldn't catch and make plays on the football. So he's a guy that is a primary read quarterback. Again, there are a lot of things he's going to have to work on in order to improve as a passer. And at the next level, he's not ready to play right now. He is not ready to step into an NFL offense and be the leader of anybody's football team. just yet. There is some work that needs to be done with Bryce Petty, but there are a lot of intangibles here. In the 4th round, 103rd overall selection, quarterback out of Baylor, Bryce Petty for me is a double. By far the most intriguing pick, not just in this Jets draft, but really in this Jets franchise right now, if you think about it, because the Jets are only going to go as far as their quarterback position takes them. Right now, Geno Smith has a chance to put a stranglehold on this position. We'll see what 2015 holds for him, but if he's not able to do that, Bryce Petty, at worst, needs to turn into a serviceable backup. Even if he's not the guy, he's not the answer, because to me, Geno Smith isn't the type of player that is going to be able to accept a backup quarterback role in this league. He's either a starter or he's not in the National Football League, because his ego, his mentality is one that says, I'm a starter, he'll become a malcontent. I don't think Geno Smith can last in this league if he's not a starter. He's going to pout, he's going to whine, he's not going to be an ideal teammate if he's not starting. So to me, what you have to do is figure out if Bryce Petty is a starter or he's a backup, but he needs to be something for this Jets football team when it's all said and done. You go to the 5th round, 152nd overall selection, offensive guard out of Texas A&M, Jarvis Harrison is the selection. You go to his pros, 6'4", 330-pound offensive lineman. This is a guy that is big, he is physical, he anchors well. That's the next pro. He sat down so well at Texas A&M, and he blocked for some studs. We know about Johnny Manziel and what he was able to do, and they have an explosive offense, and so he's a guy that was able to help them in a number of ways, whether it's Johnny taking off with the football or one of their quarterbacks from last year taking off with the football, whether it's their running backs taking off with the football, or whether they just need time to throw the football. So he's a guy that anchors well. You don't see him being bull rushed and pushed back into the lap of the quarterback. You've got ample space when Jarvis Harrison is blocking in front of you to step up in the pocket and make a great throw. He handles twists and stunts well. Those twist games and those stunt games that they try to run, those tackle and end twists and all those things, he wasn't going for it. All right, he was passing guys off and ready to absorb some contact from a guy coming over from a different angle. He picked it up beautifully. I didn't see him beat with one tackle or twist or stunt or anything like that while I was watching the tape, and I watched at least 4 or 5 tapes on this kid. I was very surprised at how well he and left tackle Cedric Agui handled those tackle and end twist and stunts so well. You would think that they have been working alongside each other for quite some time, which isn't the case. And those two really were in unison, in lockstep with one another. They were passing off the defenders and they were holding their ground. I really thought they did a magnificent job, and Jarvis Harrison was really holding his ground against those tackle twists and stunts. He gets to the 2nd level. Here's a guy that isn't the best athlete in the world, but definitely can get to that 2nd level and do it effortlessly. I think this is a guy that you can trust in the run game to get to that 2nd level, wall off a defender, and give you a clear rushing lane. Know exactly how to cut off of his block. I like Jarvis Harrison and his ability to get to that 2nd level. Here's a guy with some versatility, all right? He played guard, and that's the position you're going to look for him to excel at the next level. But when Agui went down, he moved to left tackle. This is a guy that you can play at tackle, has played enough at tackle for you to feel comfortable kicking him outside the tackle if necessary. They also put him at fullback when they were in power formation. So when they felt like, hey, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, we're trying to get our big beefy guys on the field, they would take him away from the guard position, put him in the backfield as a fullback, and he would be the lead blocker. So again, I talked about him getting to the 2nd level. He can also lead block if need be. There are a number of ways you can utilize this guy. And so Jarvis Harrison was a big threat for Texas A&M along that offensive line, and they would move him around and put him in situations to be successful, which would in turn allow the offense to be successful. So this is a guy that has some versatility at the next level. You know, the more you can do, the better it is for you sticking on a roster. Starting experience in the SEC, that cannot be discounted. You ask any GM around the league, and that means something. If all things being considered are essentially the same, you're talking about a guy that's right around the same height, weight, they play the same position, they do a lot of the same things well. You ask them which one would they prefer. They're taking the SEC guy because they know he's going up against NFL caliber talent week in and week out. So starting experience in the SEC, it means something. 47 games played, 38 of those starts. That's a pro in itself for Jarvis Harrison. His cons: trouble with speed to the outside, and that's why I don't think you necessarily want him as a tackle, because I don't think he moves his feet laterally well enough to keep up with elite speed rushers to the outside. But as a guard, you got a little bit of help. Sometimes he still struggled with the speed to the outside, didn't have any problems moving towards the inside and protecting that way, which is the more imminent pressure anyhow. But still, he needs to clean up any kind of speed rush to the outside. When I saw him beat on tape, when I saw him whiffing, when I saw guys being able to get by him, it was when they beat him with pure speed to the outside. I'd like to see him finish his blocks a little better, and I'm nitpicking him, okay? Here's a guy that, he's one of those guys that likes to punch. And when you got guys that want to punch often, they don't lock up guys, you're allowed to be free to make plays. If I punch you and I don't have my hands on you and the running back's coming, guess what? I've already disengaged from you. All I gotta do is go make a play. And so I'd love to see Jarvis Harrison actually get his hands on guys. Yeah, the initial punch is fine to thwart the rush. Then get your hands on them, lock them up, and get them out of the play. I'm nitpicking here because I thought he did an adequate job, but he could do an even better job at keeping guys from making plays and impacting runs and plays that they shouldn't be getting involved in if he would just finish off his block. And so this is a solid football player. I think he's a guy that could start for this Jets team down the road in a year or two from now. I don't think he's going to have an impact that greatly this season. If guys are able to stay relatively healthy, I don't see him coming in and having a chance this year. But next year, the year after that, with a little bit of development, I think this is a guy that can help you. In the 5th round, 152nd overall selection, offensive guard out of Texas A&M, Jarvis Harrison, for me, is a double. Solid football player, has some skills that can benefit you in the long run, but needs a little bit more development to help him get a chance to get his footing in the National Football League. And finally, you round out the Jets draft in the 7th round, 223rd overall selection, nose tackle out of Northwestern State, Deion Simon is the pick. I'm not gonna lie to you, wasn't a lot of tape here on this kid. I had to scrounge together what I could. So just off of the fact that I didn't see him enough, I'm not going to really be very sold on what I saw from him. But he's 6'4", 321 pounds. He's well proportioned. He's a strong man, okay? And really, he's strong when he uses proper leverage. And the little bit of tape that I did see, when he would get his hands up under the pads of an offensive lineman, a guard, he could be very problematic, okay? He's a guy that could drive that offensive lineman 2-3 yards in the backfield, blow a play up, and really cause problems for the offense and the fluidity of that offense. However, here's a guy that if he doesn't get great leverage, he doesn't move you at all. 32 reps of 2 1/4 lets you know that this is a strong man we're talking about here. So Deion Simon has the ability, he just needs to use proper technique. He can be a space eater. At Northwestern State, they played in a 4-3 defense. He's coming into a Jets team that plays a 3-4, so I'm looking to see how he makes that transition from 4-3 technique to a 3-4-5 technique potential nose. So we'll see what the Jets have in store for him if he's able to do enough to live out his NFL dream, because he's a 7th round pick, which means you're behind the 8 ball. You know the Jets' defensive line is stacked. He's going to have to come in and prove he belongs, or else he will not make this football team. We go to his cons. Inconsistent motor. This was the thing that really got me upset. I watched one full tape on this guy, and I like to really have a better sample size than one tape. Watch one tape and a bunch of highlights. I can't stand highlights. So here's my problem with him. Inconsistent motor. Now, When you get your brains bashed in 70-6, it's easy to quit, okay? I watched this Northwestern State team play Baylor. All right, no Bryce Petty. He was out with an injury that game, so you got a backup quarterback. You'd like to see them come out with better effort than they did in this game. Now, second play of the game, okay? Deion Simon blurs into the backfield. I mean, literally, knifes into the backfield, grabs the running back, slings him on the ground for a 1-yard loss. And I'm like, man, that's impressive. Got my mouth watering. My palate is wet now. Appetite's really, really ready to go. I'm like, okay, that's how you set the table. What's the main course? I didn't see the guy make another play the entire game, and that's the inconsistency I'm talking about. He wins on the first snap, literally the second snap of the game, and I don't see this guy win again in that game. Yeah, they lost 70-6. Wasn't a lot of winning to be had. However, I still need to see you flash, and that's the inconsistency that I'm talking about. Transition from a 4-3 to a 3-4, I kind of already spoke towards that. He's going to have to make that transition. I don't think that's going to be as tough, but again, it's still a transition for a guy that's a 7th-round pick. Anything that he has to do that's different from what he did in college is going to be a bit of a problem. He's a 2-down player. You're not getting a 3-down player. You're not getting a guy that's going to get pressure on the quarterback. He's a run-stuffing, space-eating defensive lineman that I think could be a 2-gap player. I do not think he is a guy that is going to get any pressure on the quarterback. Level of competition, played at Northwestern State, enough said. Look, he's already here, he's at the next level. Now we need to see what he's all about. Knee injury. Sprained his MCL, caused him to miss the final 5 games of his senior season. Was able to get healthy enough to compete at the combine and do all of the pro day things. So I think that injury is behind him. Don't want to see that creep up on him during training camp because, again, he needs all the reps that he can get. He cannot afford to be injured if he wants to make this Jets roster. With that being said, I didn't see enough on tape, and again, I didn't have enough tape to really evaluate this guy as well as I would have liked to. So, of course, in the 7th round, 223rd overall selection, nose tackle out of Northwestern State, Deion Simon for me is a single. I think he's got an uphill battle to climb. If he's looking to make this roster, we'll see if he's able to do enough to crack this aggressive Jets defensive line. And so that is the Jets 2015 NFL Draft wrap up. Let's go over their grades and see what their final score will be for their draft. You look at the 1st round and the 2nd round, 2 back-to-back jacks for the New York Jets. And so 2 home runs to start, 3 straight doubles in the middle of this draft in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. So 3 doubles nets you an extra double as a doubles bonus. You round out the draft with a 7th round single from Deion Simon, and you find yourself with 17 points. You divide by the 6 selections the Jets had, it nets you a 2.8 double. That is the 2015 NFL Draft wrap-up of the Jets. It is a 2.8 double for the Jets. That's going to do it for their draft wrap-up, and that's going to do it for me if it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small. We cover it all here in the lab room. Come back and join me as I continue to break down anything and everything in the National Football League. Who's next? There's plenty more where that came from. While you're here, subscribe to the channel. If you want more Louie T, be sure to follow me on Twitter at In The Lab Room, or you can like the Facebook page at In The Lab Room. That's In The Lab Room on Facebook and at In The Lab Room on Twitter. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so.
Mm-hmm.